Well, I think I'm good to go, so I'm going to go ahead and get this rolling. Thanks, everybody, for attending my session today. I'm excited to present on this again. I've done it at a couple other Atlassian conferences, some other higher ed conferences. And so just to tell you a little bit about myself, my name is Brant Schroeder. I work at Washington State University. I've been there for quite a while. I've also been utilizing Atlassian products almost since they kind of came to be, so close to 15 years now, and I'm pretty spend quite a bit of time also in the Atlassian community and participating there. I'd say some of my expertise is kind of my background in project and portfolio management, as well as ITSM and organizational change. And so as we kind of get rolling here, just to help me maybe touch on some points or maybe share some different information, I kind of wanted to know what your guys' current position is and how you currently are using JSM. If you just want to put that in live chat and blow it up right now, that would be great. And I'll just kind of take a look at those. And I have a follow-up question to that you might want to just kind of add on as well. And that would be, what are you kind of hoping to get out of this session? Like, why are you attending? So if you just want to put that in live chat, that'd be helpful for me. I'll give you a few minutes to do so. All right. Well, I have a sleepy group maybe at the end of the day. So what I'm going to go over today is I'm going to talk about when Washington State University went live with Workday in 2020, actually 2021. I was a project lead for that. And so as part of that, I had to come up with a solution that would be able to handle influx of questions that we would have. And so I'm going to talk about kind of the problem that we faced, the solution that we implemented, how we're able to gather support around that, and then how we implemented it and kind of the results of what that was. And so just kind of hopping into the problem, like I said, we implemented in December of 2020, we did a big bang of Workday with HCM, finance, payroll, expense, procurement, recruitment, and time tracking. And so we basically implemented almost every single module that there was. In talking with our different peer institutions, they had let us know that they ran into, when they just did their HCM implementation, over 60,000 requests that came in the first month. And they had, these institutions had around 13,000 employees as well, and that's kind of what we have. And so we knew that we had a pretty big problem that we were going to have to handle, and that was going to be a massive influx of support requests of individuals that would either be utilizing the system as kind of like a user, or our central offices that would be supporting those users. And then we had a central implementation team that would also be supporting those individuals as well. And so we knew that we had to tackle that early on, and it was something we were going to have to deal with. And so what we came up with and what we decided to do was kind of a three-pronged approach. We decided that we'd implement a large online training library within Percipio. In this training library, we would have specific videos that would address common tasks that users would have to do within the system. So if like I'm an employee and I want to check my payroll, or if I want to do payroll withholdings, we created videos that would help with those more common tasks. A lot of the video library, though, actually addressed the individuals that would be supporting those users. So how do I actually run payroll? How do I hire someone? And so we built out, and we're very specific about kind of what those, what that training library would have based on information that we were able to gather from other institutions. Then the next thing that we focused on was having a very robust knowledge base of self-help articles. And so we started out by identifying, I believe, around 200 different knowledge-based articles. These would be self-help type items that we thought might be common questions that we were able to solicit from other institutions from when they went live. And then over the course of the project, we continually gathered feedback from users, what we called our power users that were helping us test the system and validate processes. And we would gather information from them and expand that library. And today, I think it's currently around 400 plus articles. And so that's been very helpful and has played a significant role, and you'll see in the solution the results of what we ended up doing. And then the third piece is we knew that we needed to have a good way to take in questions and provide timely answers. And so we decided to implement Jira Service Desk, and our knowledge base was implemented in Confluence. And so that was nice because we were able to tie those things together, create a single place where individuals could go to ask questions. And then hopefully as they're asking those questions, they would go ahead and find answers without having to submit a ticket to get that solution. And so that was kind of what I came up with to do, because I'd used these products before on other projects and had been very successful in that. And just to kind of give you an idea of our ticketing solution, when we went live, I think we had around 50 request types. That actually got trimmed down to close to 30 after go live, and there's 10 different groups that those things were in. And then we're up to around 70 request types now and 13 different groups. And I'll explain why a little bit later, why it went that direction. So one of the biggest problems that I've had when implementing a service desk with different units across campus is just the immediate project team and individuals that are using it are like, hey, we don't want to be monitored. We don't want you kind of seeing what we're doing. We're happy answering questions via Teams, via email, via the phone. And so I started with our immediate implementation team and worked with them to say, hey, these are the different benefits. This is how it can help and support you. This is what we would expect to get out of it. And so really kind of almost like a sales pitch with them to get them on board. They were already utilizing Jira software, and that's what we ran our whole project in. And then they were already using Confluence for documentation of the project. So it was a little bit of an easier sell with the project team to say, here's another tool that you're familiar with that can make your life easier at go live. And one of the other things I wanted to do there is by getting that project team on board and supportive of moving that forward, I knew that if the executive leadership team or the central teams had questions, they would go back to those project leads and the project team with those questions. And so by doing that kind of ahead of time and answering questions, getting people excited, what it ended up doing is provided a great resource as executive leadership had questions or the central teams had questions. And they actually help support and help move that process forward. The next thing that it kind of jumped into was working with executive leadership. Since the ERP spanned multiple departments and pretty big different units on campus, and there was a lot of different ideas of how the support should be constructed and kind of how HR should support their questions versus finance or versus payroll. And so kind of bringing those unit heads together and explaining the benefit of having kind of a one-stop shop for all of the users, and also the benefit of streamlining that request process, I think helped them to kind of catch the vision of what we wanted to do here at Washington State University. I will tell you that wasn't easy. It took a lot of discussions. And so when I started this project and leading the project, there's a lot of planning that went in beforehand. And so a lot of these things I knew about well in advance of our go live. And like I said, we went live in end of December of 2020 and January of 2021 was when we had our cutovers. But these were things I actually was working on over a year in advance to start getting people thinking about, so that we could have something at go live. And when working with the executive team, some of the things that we really ran into, individuals were concerned about like security, especially HR. They're saying, hey, we have requests come in. Sometimes they're a little bit more sensitive. How are you going to protect that information from somebody maybe in finance from seeing it, or even in other individuals within the payroll team? And so I was able to construct kind of just a little demo for them where I could show how issue security could meet that need, and how we could keep things, I guess, in the proper groups when necessary. But we also, one of the things that went into in this, since the ERP has so many overlapping consequences to configuration and when things are done in it, I went into the attitude that I think Atlassian takes, and that's teamwork, transparency, accountability. The product is built around kind of those things, which helped to be able to say, look, this will allow us to track and identify defects at a much larger level. It will ensure that we have quick response time to the customers and be able to answer their questions in a timely manner. It was also a great way for us to track and see who is asking questions across different departments, different areas, so that we could even maybe target those areas for additional training if it was needed. And then we were able to also use it to say, hey, this is missing training in our library or KB articles that we need. And so talking through that with them helped them really understand kind of that vision and say, okay, this will help us be much more successful. And then once I had the executive leadership on board and they had bought into the vision for the most part, then there was the outreach with the central teams. And so what I mean by that is our implementation team was responsible for like the configuration, and that's what I'm calling the immediate project team there, and with configuration and support of that configuration. But the central teams, like our payroll team, was actually responsible for executing and getting out payroll for the first time. And our central HR was still responsible for putting together like the position descriptions in the system and ensuring that open positions are in place. And if there's a salary increase, that those get applied and that type of stuff. And so we had a lot of our central team that would be supporting end users across campus, but also would need some support too. And so they would be agents within the application, but also customers as well. And so going out to them and working with them and kind of helping them gain the vision with the support of the executive leadership allowed us to then move it forward. And so after we had that support, one of the things that we focused on was utilizing everybody that we were working with here to actually build out the solution. And so everybody participated in that. And so that kind of brings me now to implementation. And so before we implemented the service desk, before we implemented our knowledge base in Confluence, I took quite a bit of time where I worked with the different units to truly understand kind of what the questions that they get on a regular basis are. We did some outreach to other institutions to find out what questions they kind of got on a regular basis after go live. And that allowed us to construct out a pretty robust request type, a number of request types for the different areas that would go into the knowledge base. And then after we had those request types in place, we tried to standardize, because we're on enterprise and we're not in the cloud, so we didn't have forms. We tried to standardize kind of the number of custom fields that we'd be using to try to keep those at a minimum, knowing that we would have quite a few, but we tried to make sure that we were making them reusing them as much as possible to cut down on the overhead and also make it easier to implement the service desk. And we also worked with them to kind of define what areas could be open with questions, so kind of everybody could see and help support those, and which ones needed to be more locked down so that only specific individuals could see those. And then we built out our implementation of the Jira Service Desk in our demo environment, our test environment, and we had them go in and kind of use it and understand how it functioned as a user and made sure that we weren't missing anything. On the knowledge base side, we did a very similar thing where we built out a knowledge base template. We had specific user guides that had to be used. We did training on all of that. We had specific labels that we put in place. And we had a process that if you wanted a new label, how to go through our change control to ensure that we were using specific labels to answer specific request types so that when individuals were searching for answers, they were getting good information within our service desk. And then we had very rigid, I guess, requirements around an article and how it had to be formatted, how it had to be built out. And there were two reasons behind this. I wanted consistency for the end user and how the articles look and feel. Also, ensuring that they got the information they needed by putting it back on the individuals that were writing the article, that they had to meet specific requirements. We put it in their plate to ensure that they were getting the information on there in a robust manner, so that they were answering questions and it wasn't just a quick knowledge-based article that got published. And every single knowledge-based article went through our change control process as well before it was published and was reviewed internally. And like I said, there were specific labels that were applied on those, which ended up making for a really robust and easily searchable knowledge base. Then after we had kind of all that put together in our test instance, we did migrate it to production. And one of the last things that we did before go live is we had our acceptance testing for about 6 months. And so during that time, we actually used it as a time for us to hone the service desk. We had our power users submitting all of their requests and issues through the service desk. So that made sure that there was about 500 individuals, 500 employees that were utilizing it on a regular basis. So that they were comfortable with it at go live, and we really tasked them with providing feedback on how well it worked for them, if there was gaps, if there was anything that was confusing. And so we took that 6 months to really hone that service desk and our KBs to make sure that there weren't things that were missing. And then on the flip side, with having our implementation team as well as our central teams using it to answer those questions, they got very comfortable with the system before they had the big onslaught of questions that would come in at go live. And then from the very get-go, one of the things that we did say, and we kind of made it the culture of the service desk, is that it should always be changing. And what I mean by that is we learn new things as we see that there's issues or things that could be addressed, that we would actually be thoughtful about doing that and make adjustments to make the service desk better for the end user. And so that was great, because that means end users were not afraid to provide feedback on it. It means that our agents, everybody that was using it, was not afraid to provide feedback either. And that made for a very open and collaborative environment, which allowed us to make those adjustments and nobody getting offended or maybe getting stuck into a certain process or procedure even when it wasn't working. So let me show you a few screenshots here. So in our knowledge base, we had that guide that I was talking about. you can see there. And we had, like I said, guidelines around articles. We had information about what type of labels could be used and how they should be applied, and then how to construct those knowledge-based articles, and even the process that you'd need to go through to get those approved was all documented there for the end users. And we did a training on it as well for those that would be creating knowledge-based articles. And then on the Workday service desk, we put together pretty robust training as well. And you can see kind of all the different documentation that was put together for that. And what that allowed us to do is team members came on and off. We could refer them here, but then it was also a resource guide for our agents. There's a lot going on in the project, so they were able to step away and go, okay, I need to get back in the service desk. I don't remember how to maybe do a transfer of a ticket that has issue security on it to a different department because it got submitted to the wrong area. And so they could quickly come in here, get the information they needed, and then tackle that within the service desk. This is just kind of our labels. As you can see, I think when we went live, we had about 50 labels or something like that. That has since ballooned, and I'll talk a little bit why a little bit later. But yeah, and so like I said, we had a process for getting labels approved. And then this is a screenshot of our knowledge base. It looked a little bit different at Go Live because we had it public facing. Because of some of the information we published, Workday asked us to not. So we had to put it behind authentication, which is fine. We wanted it public so people didn't have to hop in, but in the end, we only had maybe like 50 users that were using it in that manner. Most everybody else found everything through the service desk. And so this is just some more information so you can see some of the articles that were published there. And then, so just to provide some results. So at Go Live, we had around, I think it was in the first 2 months, 6,000 requests that came in. But we had within that first month over 40,000 articles that were reviewed. And so that was on top of the video trainings that we were doing. But we had nowhere near as many requests come in as our peer institutions did because of, I think, our upfront planning that we did, the work that we did around our training and outreach before we go live, and then having such a robust knowledge base and having a central repository where people could go and get questions answered. And so within the first year, we had 26,000 requests that came in, which is substantially less than UW did when they went live with their HCM. And so it was really good to see this. And then we had 21,000 out of those 26,000 that we met our SLAs, and kind of talk a little bit about that. We decided as a group that we were going to ensure that everybody knew that our teams were there to support them. This was a big change. We went from a mainframe to Workday. So we went from green screens and people that had been working in those green screens for like 20, 30 years to you could do things on your phone now and in a web browser. And we had people that were used to maybe skirting processes because there was nothing that can enforce those, to an application that did enforce process. And so there was a lot of change happening for individuals. And so we wanted to make sure that they knew that we were there to help and support them. And so having that 1 hour response for every single issue that came in, I think really showed that. And when I mean 1 hour response, did that mean that we answered the question at that time? Absolutely not. But it was just, hey, we got your request and we're working on it. Sometimes it was just we're sending them back to a KB article and quickly closing it out. Sometimes it was, this is going to take us a lot more time. We'll let you know how this progresses. And then the other SLA that we had was to get every single issue closed, no matter how large or small it was, within 24 hours. And that's 24 business hours. So I should have put 24 working hours. So that's technically 3 full days to get something closed. But what I think that did is by having that responsiveness, it also encouraged the community to come to the service desk. A lot of them were upset that when we went live, we told them we wouldn't be answering emails and phone, chat messages. You had to use the service desk for questions. Did that always happen? Absolutely not. But there was a precedence that was set. And so being responsive there, I think, created a culture within the university that if I go to the service desk and I can't find the answer myself, I am going to get an answer at least from everybody that's supporting us there. And then our first year, our customer satisfaction rating was like 4.8. And just so you guys know, everybody was super intimidated about us actually asking for the review. I don't know why. I think it's a good thing. But they were like, I don't want people reviewing my requests. And that was something our central teams, even central leadership, didn't want. I said, it'll be good. Let's do it. And it ended up being really good because a lot of the users were impressed by how quickly we were responding to questions. And they voiced that in those ratings. And so users were going back, our agents were going back in, and they're like, wow, this person left me this great comment. And then we started using it in our kind of daily touch bases during go live to say, hey, make a call out for excellent customer service that maybe an agent provided. And what that did, it kind of became contagious and energized those agents. So if they did maybe have a really bad call, which happened, people would be upset about something, they're working with them on a request. They could kind of go back and be like, well, I helped 40 other people that thought I was awesome. It's just this one that didn't. And so that generated a lot of energy. And that's something that we continued to do since then. And so in the last year, so we've been live now for 3 years. And just in this last year, we've had over 75,000 knowledge base article views. So that's gone down substantially from the first year, but it's actually up quite a bit from our last year. And I'll talk a little bit why. We've had over 18,000 requests come in, and then 16,000 of those requests met our SLA, with another 1,100 just barely breaching that. And so one thing that we have seen is we've kept those SLAs in place. We talked about adjusting them at certain times, but really it's meeting our customer services need at this time. And so we've left them in place. We have sometimes gotten a little slack. If you look at those requests, you say, wow, you probably had a better percentage at go live of meeting SLAs. And that's because that was a huge focus. And we kind of have to do a little bit of management training occasionally to kind of remind them like, hey, make sure you're paying attention to SLAs, make sure it's top of mind, so that we can continue to provide good customer service and have a high customer satisfaction rating, which has actually increased over time. But the other thing that we have run into is we have a lot more requests that are coming in that are way more difficult. So we kind of made it through that easy time period of, I'd say, our transition the first year and a half to where people are comfortable with the system. Now we're getting into stuff where it needs to be addressed through our change control process. It's probably going to require some changes to the system that are a little bit larger. And so that's one of the reasons why I think that the SLAs are impacted a little bit as well. One of the other things that we have done is at Go Live, we really focused on just the Workday application and trying to answer questions there. But because everybody used it so well and got used to asking questions there, our central offices still wanted to say, hey, if a unit had a question about a certain process or something like that, that would be handled probably by somebody in the management within HR. They kind of wanted those things to still happen via email. But over time, what we've seen is they're like, hey, enough with this email stuff. We really like having everything there. Our team's kind of already working there. Can we add more and more requests there? And so that's why we had, like 40 requests and now, or 40 request types that go live. And now we're up to, I think, like around 50 or 60, is because we have been bringing more of those central units, processes for questions and that type of stuff into our Jira Service Management, and all in that single service desk too. And that's having that single service desk also allows us to really see kind of trends around questions that we're seeing with Workday, issues that we're seeing with Workday, and being able to quickly address those. Like I said, either through configuration changes or something that's broken that we need to do, or if there is a maybe a just a configuration issue or a bug from one of the updates that Workday released with us. And so that's kind of what has occurred and how we've been able to benefit from the product. We have continued to add additional knowledge-based articles for different units. And so I think right now we go live at around 200. I think we're a little over 400 now articles in there. We don't do as much with the videos anymore because those were a lot to maintain. But we do consistently read through the knowledge-based articles and make adjustments to those. Each year we do a review of those, and so there's times where we pull things down, and there's other times where we just update them to make sure it's meeting users' needs. So looking back at it, I think we were able to have such a successful Workday launch, and especially in this area, because of the forethought that we had ahead of time and bringing everybody to the same table and having them all participate in the actual construction of the service desk and the knowledge-based articles, I think helped us succeed because everybody backed it, everybody supported it, and that drove our customers there, who then learned to appreciate it and use it well. And that's been also shown since we've had additional units continue to utilize the product, and we've been able to use it to improve our training, communication, and outreach as well. So that's all I had. So I was hoping for a lot of questions. It looks like we do have some, yeah. So I'll jump into those now. I don't know, maybe Clint, if you want to read them off for everybody, and then
absolutely. Yep. Wesley Oliveira asks, tell me a little bit about how you manage the KB governance and consistency. Do you have a specific team member or squad to perform knowledge management, create and review articles, create and review labels, etc.?
Yeah, good question. So, during the implementation, we had our change management team that was responsible for that approval process. And so I guess I'll step back a little bit and explain. So I've been a long time user of the product. So I knew for our product, our knowledge-based articles to be successful within JSM, having proper labels and keywords is super important for people to be able to find those when they're searching within the product. And so we decided early on to say, hey, we're going to come up with a labeling system that's in line with kind of the different areas that people use within the Workday application. And then we worked to kind of say, based on the request types, and that's kind of really where it started, is reaching out to the units. What type of questions do you get? What type of things are you doing and supporting at this time? We were able to take that and kind of drive our first labels that we came up with. And then when we said, okay, now that we have these labels that we have in place, how do we ensure that we get good KBs? And so we actually built out a template that had title had different definitions of key areas that you had to fill in on that template. And so, for instance, like I think title, you had to try and use keywords, and it had to be very descriptive in what people were looking for. So if it was like, how do I view my pay slip, was the title. And then we had a description, and the description was, we asked them to be 2 to 3 sentences. So basically a small paragraph that would describe in a high level everything that was contained in that article. And then once again, kind of keying in on what those keywords were. So if it was like payslip and payroll, getting those written into that description. And then the next piece was actually the steps to actually do whatever it was that was contained in that knowledge base article. And we had a couple of different items that we asked them to do as well. So like if there was something that was important, we used information box, or it was the alert box, I think in Confluence, that showed it would be in red. And then if it was something that was like informative that they should know about, then maybe we'd use the green one. And so there's things that we did to help break up and make the flow of the article really good for the end user and the customer to be using it. And then when we decided, okay, we have our process in place, and that's going to be the change management team is going to review these and make sure it meets a standard. The change management team also looked at it to make sure that like misspelling, grammar, kind of language stuff was in place. Then we implemented actually a process in Jira where they would submit their article to, and then we could make sure that it went through that process and before it was published. After go live, the change management team became kind of our communication team, and there's just 2 people that are in there now. During the project we had 4, but now there's just 2, and they still manage that process. And so as those new articles come in, or if there's a new label, they would take that through our change. We still have a change control team, and would have discussions around that. And then once it gets approved, they help implement that. And they also go back and review articles too. And so we look at our statistics of how articles are being used, and ones that haven't been used for a while, we look at maybe why, if the information's bad. But they try to kind of hit on most articles once a year, so which is pretty big lift for just those 2 individuals. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, fantastic. We have another question from an anonymous user. How have you navigated the resistance from employees still looking to get help with old and traditional support channels such as email?
So you heard me say that at Go Live, we told them that really the only way that they could get support was through the service desk. And so knowing that our central team was going to have a heavy lift of just doing things in the system themselves, as well as supporting end users, and then the implementation team supporting central teams as well as end users. We wanted to ensure that they weren't distracted by phone calls. They weren't distracted by Teams messages and emails. Now, did that still occur? Absolutely. We had some individuals that would still provide help there. But I will also say the ones that were the most successful in resolving issues quicker and getting things out to the end users actually utilize the service desk. And so by doing that, we ran that for 30 days. So for 30 days, if you sent something via email, if you called and left a voicemail, we said we would check those channels, but it could be up to a week delay before we would get back to you. And by doing that, I think it kind of set a precedence to everybody that if they wanted answers, they needed to go here. And then I will say the reason we've had success moving forward, and I guess one of the things I should say there too is I had vice president, president support of the university. Like our leadership teams would 100% back that too. And so they announced it and it was an expectation. So you definitely have to have high level support, I think, first off. But then once we did that, I think with being able to provide excellent customer service and having good resources there, people used it and they still do. That's still their number one thing. They'll go there first, oftentimes before they ever call anybody. And that's been a little bit of a cultural shift, even for the people in the office. There's some of them that will complain sometimes, like, I really like getting a call, or I like getting this via Teams. And it just doesn't happen as much. And I think with us paying attention to that year after year after year, having that high level of customer support and having good KBE articles in there just helps continue to drive that culture across the university.
Excellent. Another question from Prabhu Palaniswamy. Thanks, Brant, for the insights. Did the project involve direct integration between Workday and JSM?
So I can say kind of yes and no on that one. So did we have a lot of stuff coming from Workday directly into our service desk? No, we didn't. We only had 2 different request types that were filled via I wouldn't even really call it integration, to tell you the truth. It was just it rerouted an email in. Since Go Live, we do some stuff with our integrations, actual integration errors, using the integrations to Jira. And then other projects that have been on, like our PeopleSoft Campus Solutions, we did build several integrations. And I would assume as kind of our Workday team matures, I mean, we've only been on the product for 3 years. I would assume that more things will maybe come from that. Like I said, most of our integration errors, those type of things that need to be either something that needs to be rectified or fixed, are being fed in now. But at the time we went live, we had like 2 emails, I think, or 2 different processes that kicked off emails that just went to the service desk. So not an actual integration.
Excellent. Another question coming in from Wesley. Does your employee support experience engage tickets related to the corporate IT team as well, or just related to HR services? If not, does the corporate IT team use JSM as well?
Yeah, great question. So Wesley, before I was leading the project, I worked in central IT, and before I was within our business and finance unit, and I implemented JSM there, and we actually implemented it as an enterprise offering, and we made it free. And so we have actually units all over campus that utilize it. Our central IT team has their own service desk. They have their own service desk within that instance. And of course, everything does feed up. And so somebody could hop in and ask a question and get information across. And so from a much broader scope, when I implemented that, we put together a policy at that level of, like, when you're implementing service desk, naming convention for request types, even kind of like labeling and stuff at a much larger university level. And so there's a user group that gets together and of all the different JSM users, and they kind of have a once a month thing that they do, user group meeting that I set up. And so if there's specific needs, questions, those type of things that come up, they attend that user group and they ask those questions. For the Workday implementation, it was my technical team. So I had a small IT team that was supporting like integrations, conversions, that type of stuff. The HR team and our finance team, which incorporated like payroll and those things. But they were all housed within a single service desk. And that actually, in my opinion, is why we were so successful and have continued to be so successful. And we do have some stuff that we work with central IT on, some of our integrations with our PeopleSoft instance. And so we do pass tickets back and forth, but that's a process that I established before, like when I implemented JSM at the university as a whole a long time ago. And so we do pass tickets back and forth between our service desks using that process. So hopefully that's helpful to you.
Awesome. So Girish Reddy asked, does your JSM implementation serve your student population, or is it limited to employees?
It does serve our student population. It actually did that first. And so when I was over in ITS, like I said, we implemented it as our ITSM solution. And so we used it to service all customers across campus, including students. We had great success there, and then we had a lot of people wanting to participate, and so we did. We purchased enterprise license, opened it up free. I created some SLAs so that people would sign on, know what type of support that they were going to get, and created a user group, and then policies and procedures around how units would use the product if they onboarded to it, so that we could have some consistencies across all the different service desks. And I know that our admissions, and there's so many units now, like College of Business, Connors, like there's tons and tons of units across campus that use it. And so a lot of our students do go there, and Confluence does house our central knowledge base as well. And so if you have questions about a lot of different things as a student, you would just log in and you'd have access to that. So yes.
All right, let's see. Do we have any other questions? Yeah, we got one in from Kristen Kress. He asks, what advice would you give to successfully implement knowledge management in a company?
I'm a big person about it's not the tool, but it's the processes and the policies that you put in place, because a tool is only going to be as good as that. And so my advice would be is coming up with a very solid foundation that your individuals are creating the knowledge base can build off of. Don't make it the wild, wild west, because if the moment you do that, you're going to have some units that will really succeed, and you'll have others that won't. And the ones that don't succeed aren't going to like it and push back against it because they're not succeeding in it. And so I think it's when you're looking at it is like saying, hey, what's the problem we're trying to solve with our knowledge base? What's really the end user need? And how can we best meet that? And then building some structure around that, like where are policies and procedures going to be to support that end need that we have, and then getting people rallied around that. And oftentimes that means including them, and I would say in some part of the building out of those policies and procedures. So you might help develop the vision. You might even know kind of what the framework is, what those policies and procedures will be, but you need to include those people that are going to be participating in that early on and let them have a say and listen to them. And I guarantee you they're actually going to help those policies and procedures and what you end up coming up with be much better than what your framework is. And by having them being included in that and being part of that process, they're going to embrace it and then help move that forward. So it's really, at the end of the day, it's like, how can you create like a good community, a good team around it, and a culture at your company that they embrace it. And I think those things really help do that. And get leadership support first off. I mean, otherwise it would probably tank, even if it's great. I mean, sometimes you get stuff through, but yeah.
All right. Wesley is back with some more questions. So let's see. Do you believe the end users still have doubts about how to engage the support teams? How do you solve this problem? I assumed you are using just one customer portal from the JSM perspective to engage employee center and central IT. Am I right?
Yeah. So Yeah, so we have our overarching portal. It has multiple service desks in it. You're correct. Um, and most of our employees just go directly to like we just call it, it's like our business and finance portal now, because that incorporates HCM, ITS, all that stuff now. And I would say, do they have doubts about how to engage support teams? No, I think we do have a few little offshoots of teams or departments that aren't fully embracing it yet. And so that's where maybe confusion arises. I will say, after being 3 years in it and having some turnover with employees across campus, new people coming in, sometimes we do have to remind ourselves that we need to remind the end user about where to go. And so that we do have a monthly newsletter that goes out around our products. We have our user groups that we actually are support user groups. And so we push that there as well. And then we recently just started doing some additional outreach with units that are really struggling in maybe some specific areas. Maybe they're really struggling in getting answers through reporting or something like that. Maybe they're really struggling with processing new employees. Something within the system where we've been doing like these on-site 40-minute visits where they can give us some stuff, and we come and we present and we open it up, and we also do that via Zoom so others can join. But we have a pretty good community. I think they know where to go. But I would say the thing is don't forget to remind them. I think it's easy to be like, oh, everybody knows. And then you do get some people saying, well, I don't, I've only worked here for 6 months. Thanks for never telling me this great information existed here. So.
All right. If there's any other questions, we have about 8 minutes left. Feel free to put them in the Q&A. And if there's not, I actually have a question that I might slip in here. So.
Slip it in, Clint.
So your results year one, the slide that you showed. So did you keep track? I'm assuming you kept track of all the requests that you were able to close by responding using a KB article. And did that over time, did that kind of represent a bell curve where it kind of ramped up as you could add more and more KB articles to answer, and then eventually it kind of died off because, like you said, eventually the requests that came in are harder now because you've answered everything via KB article. So can you talk a little bit how that looked?
Yeah, so good question. At Go Live, I would say it was like a flat line. Like nobody was answering questions with KBs for the most part. We had to and that's something we were tracking. And so when we noticed that, like 2 answers, out of 1,000 answers, you have 2 that are an actual article, and we kind of looked at some of the stuff and we're saying, oh man, they're not using that. And so we actually had to go back and remind the team, like, you can click here and you can just drop in the article. And they're like, oh, that's great. Because some of them were even cutting and pasting article information in. And so, so that was something we had to remind people about. And I actually think it's something we consistently have to remind our agents about. Some of them are really good at it. Some of them aren't. And so when you're talking about like a bell curve, I would say it's more like this. We kind of have like this ebb and flow where just depending on, because we have lost people that we're working on as agents within the system. And so when people come in, we forget to train them up on something like that. And then we notice a dip, and then it's just a reminder. So it just kind of goes back to kind of a constant reminder, making sure we're touching base with the teams and helping them meet the end users' needs. So, yeah, good question.
Nice.
Well, I think that's it. I'd just like to thank everybody again for attending. I didn't show my last slide, which had like my LinkedIn on it, and I think it had my email address. And so I'll just throw that really quick in chat, but you guys could also, I think, download those slides later on. And so if you guys have questions, feel free to reach out via email or LinkedIn. I'd love to help you out. And then, like I said, I'm always in the community, Atlassian community as well, so feel free to ping me there as well. But thanks for your time.